The Baron of Arizona was not just a historical western, it was a cinematic rebellion against Hollywood's golden age, filmed in the scorching desert with a horror icon and a renegade director. What audiences witnessed on screen was nothing compared to the powder keg exploding behind the scenes, a studio fighting to maintain control, a director pushing boundaries with every frame, and actors locked in real-life tension that mirrored their characters' conflicts. This was not just filmmaking, it was war on the Arizona plains. Today, we are digging deeper into the archives to uncover the secrets Hollywood tried to bury. These are the stories that never made it into the press kit. We are revealing 20 shocking facts about the Baron of Arizona that will forever change how you see this cult classic. And stay tuned to the end for a bonus fact so bizarre, it sounds like one of Reavis's own fabrications. Hit that notification bell and let's expose the truth behind the Baron. Number 20, the film's production code controversy almost killed it. The Baron of Arizona faced an unexpected enemy in the Production Code Administration, which objected to the film's sympathetic portrayal of a criminal mastermind. This was not just moral oversight, it was ideological censorship. The PCA argued that glorifying Reavis's intelligence and persistence without sufficient moral condemnation violated the code's requirement that criminals never appear admirable. Director Samuel Fuller fought back, refusing to add heavy-handed moralizing that would compromise the film's psychological complexity. This was not just creative difference, it was a battle for artistic integrity. The standoff lasted for months, with the film's release hanging in balance. Fuller eventually compromised by adding a brief epilogue always showing Reavis's punishment, but he made it deliberately perfunctory. This was not just satisfying censors, it was subversive compliance that preserved the film's ambivalent morality. The controversy delayed release by 3 months and nearly cost Fuller his job, but it cemented his reputation as a filmmaker who refused to bow to conventional morality. Number 19, Vincent Price broke typecasting against studio wishes. Casting Vincent Price as James Reavis was not just inspired, it was revolutionary. Price was primarily known for horror films and sophisticated villains, but Lippert Pictures initially wanted a more traditional Western actor. Director Samuel Fuller insisted on Price, recognizing that the actor's distinctive blend of charm and menace perfectly captured Reavis's psychological complexity. This was not just casting, it was career transformation. Price himself lobbied hard for the role, seeing it as an opportunity to break free from the typecasting that already threatened to define his career. This was not just ambition, it was strategic career maneuvering. Price's performance as Reavis became a turning point, demonstrating his range beyond horror and paving the way for more diverse roles. This was not just acting, it was artistic liberation that expanded Price's possibilities in Hollywood. The studio's reluctance ultimately became their gain, as Price's involvement brought a prestige to the production that it otherwise would have lacked. Number 18, the real Reavis's forgery techniques are still studied today. James Reavis's forgery methods were so sophisticated that they are still analyzed in modern forensic document examination courses. This was not just criminal skill, it was innovation in deception. Reavis developed techniques for aging paper using controlled exposure to sunlight and humidity, created custom inks from period-appropriate materials, and even fabricated watermarks by pressing designs into wet paper. What Reavis did out of greed has become foundational knowledge in document authentication. This was not just fraud. It was pioneering work in a field that would not formally exist for decades. Modern forensic experts still cite Reavis's methods as examples of how far forgers will go to create convincing documents. This was not just criminal activity, it was accidental innovation that advanced the science of document examination. The irony is palpable. A swindler's techniques now help catch other swindlers, turning criminal ingenuity into a tool for justice. Number 17, the film's budget was so small, it used stock footage. With a microscopic budget, even by 1950 standards, the Baron of Arizona incorporated stock footage from earlier westerns to save costs. This was not just financial necessity, it was creative problem solving. Director Samuel Fuller, known for his resourcefulness, seamlessly integrated these borrowed scenes with new footage, creating a surprisingly cohesive visual experience. This was not just cutting corners, it was innovative editing that expanded the film's scope beyond its budget. The most impressive aspect? Fuller often used stock footage in ironic ways, contrasting the idealized West of earlier films with his more cynical vision. This was not just recycling, it was commentary on Hollywood's myth-making. Fuller's ability to transform budget limitations into artistic strengths became a hallmark of his style. This was not just filmmaking, it was alchemy that turned base materials into cinematic gold. The stock footage, once noticed, adds another layer of meaning to a film already concerned with authenticity and fabrication. Number 16. The film ignored Reavis's mysterious disappearance. After his release from prison, James Reavis vanished from public records for nearly a decade, resurfacing only sporadically under different identities. This was not just post-prison obscurity, it was deliberate disappearance. Historical records suggest Reavis may have attempted smaller-scale frauds in California and Mexico before eventually settling in Colorado under yet another fabricated identity. The film completely omits this mysterious period, choosing instead to end with Reavis's initial downfall. This was not just narrative convenience, it was a missed opportunity to explore the psychology of a man who could not exist without deception. Reavis's ability to disappear and reinvent himself reveals something profound about identity in America. How easily it can be fabricated and discarded. This was not just criminal behavior. It was a dark reflection of American reinvention. The film's focus on the spectacular fraud rather than the subsequent life of its perpetrator mirrors how history itself prefers dramatic narratives over complex realities. Number 15. Samuel Fuller fought with the cinematographer over visual style. Director Samuel Fuller clashed repeatedly with cinematographer Ernest Miller over the film's visual approach. Miller favored the conventional, romanticized look of traditional westerns, while Fuller wanted a grittier, more documentary-style aesthetic that would reflect the film's basis in reality. This was not just creative disagreement, it was a battle over the very language of Western cinema. Fuller often overruled Miller, demanding unusual camera angles, harsh lighting, and compositions that emphasized psychological tension over pictorial beauty. This was not just artistic preference, it was ideological commitment to a more honest vision of the American West. The tension between director and cinematographer ironically enhanced the film's visual impact, creating a style that oscillates between conventional beauty and psychological realism. This was not just conflict, it was creative friction that produced something unique. Their collaboration, though fraught, resulted in a visual language that anticipates the revisionist westerns of later decades. Number 14. The real Reavis exploited gaps in international archives. James Reavis's fraud succeeded partly because he identified specific gaps in Spanish and Mexican archival records. This was not just random deception, it was targeted exploitation of historical documentation weaknesses. Reavis spent years researching which documents were missing, destroyed, or never properly filed, then created forgeries that filled these gaps perfectly. This was not just luck, it was archival intelligence that bordered on genius. What makes Reavis's scheme particularly remarkable is that he essentially reverse engineered land grant law, identifying what documentation would be needed to establish a claim and then fabricating it. This was not just criminal activity, it was sophisticated legal and historical research turned to nefarious purposes. Modern archivists still study Reavis's methods as examples of how historical documentation systems can be manipulated. This was not just fraud. It was a masterclass in exploiting institutional vulnerabilities that remains relevant in an age of digital records and information warfare. Number 13. Vincent Price created Reavis's voice based on real con artists. To develop James Reavis's distinctive vocal patterns, Vincent Price studied recordings of known swindlers and confidence artists. This was not just acting, it was linguistic anthropology. Price identified specific speech patterns common to successful con artists, measured cadence that conveys authority, strategic use of pauses for dramatic effect, and a vocabulary that mixes technical jargon with folksy simplicity. This was not just voice work, it was psychological profiling through speech. Price's Reavis speaks with the confidence of someone who has spent years perfecting not just what to say, but how to say it. This was not just performance, it was embodying the mechanics of deception. What makes Price's vocal work particularly brilliant is how it subtly shifts throughout the film, becoming more aristocratic and assured as Reavis's scheme gains momentum. This was not just consistency, it was character development through voice that mirrors Reavis's psychological transformation from clerk to baron. Number 12. The film's premiere was protested by historical purists. When The Baron of Arizona premiered in Phoenix, it faced unexpected protests from local historical societies. This was not just controversy, it was academic backlash. These groups argued that the film took excessive liberties with historical facts, potentially misleading audiences about the actual events. They specifically objected to the portrayal of Reavis as charismatic and intelligent, arguing that the real Reavis was merely a crude opportunist. This was not just scholarly quibbling, it was a fundamental disagreement about how history should be represented on screen. Director Samuel Fuller responded publicly, arguing that films should capture emotional truth rather than documentary accuracy. This was not just defense, it was a manifesto for historical fiction. The protests, though small, reflected an ongoing tension between entertainment and education that continues to shape how Hollywood approaches historical subjects. This was not just film criticism, it was a debate about who owns history and how it should be told. Number 11, the real Reavis's wife was his accomplice. The film only hints at the crucial role played by Reavis's wife Sophia in his scheme. Historical records reveal that she was not just a romantic partner, but an active participant in the fraud. This was not just marriage, it was criminal partnership. Sophia played the part of the fictional Peralta heir, lending authenticity to Reavis's claims through her presence and performance. She even traveled with Reavis to Spain to help establish their fabricated lineage. This was not just supporting role, it was essential contribution to the deception. The film reduces her involvement to that of a romantic interest, missing the opportunity to explore the dynamics of a criminal partnership built on mutual deception. This was not just narrative. Simplification. It was a reflection of 1950 cinema's tendency to marginalize women's agency. The real Sophia was as calculating as her husband, perhaps even more so as she maintained the charade long after Reavis's initial exposure. Number 10, the film's most controversial scene was cut for decades. The sequence where Reavis forges documents in the Spanish monastery originally contained a blasphemous moment where he mockingly blesses his fraudulent papers. This was not just irreverent, it was sacrilegious. The scene was cut by censors and remained missing from most releases for over 50 years. A shocking example of cultural censorship that suppressed a director's artistic vision. Director Samuel Fuller reportedly fought to keep the scene, arguing that it revealed Reavis's God complex and contempt for authority, crucial character development that the studio could not comprehend. The missing footage was only rediscovered in the 2000 during a restoration project, finally revealing Fuller's original vision. This was not just recovered film, it was a missing piece of artistic intention. The restored scene adds a dark dimension to Reavis's character, showing not just his greed, but his twisted sense of superiority over institutions, both sacred and secular. This was not just acting. It was psychological revelation that had been unjustly suppressed. Number 9, the film's score was composed by a blacklisted composer. The musical score for The Baron of Arizona was composed by Alexander Laszlo, who was later blacklisted during the McCarthy era. This was not just creative collaboration, it was political time bomb. Laszlo's involvement with the film became part of the evidence used against him during his HUAC testimony, as critics pointed to the film's questioning of authority as evidence of subversive tendencies. This was not just music, it was political ammunition. What makes this particularly ironic is that Laszlo's score incorporates traditional American folk melodies alongside Spanish influences, creating a musical tapestry that celebrates American cultural diversity. This was not just composition, it was multicultural expression that became political liability. The blacklisting not only damaged Laszlo's career, but also led to his score being replaced in some later releases of the film. This was not just professional ruin, it was cultural erasure that attempted to silence a voice celebrating America's complex identity. Number 8. The real Reavis targeted specific towns for his scheme. James Reavis did not randomly claim territory. He strategically focused on areas with valuable resources and development potential. This was not just opportunism, it was calculated exploitation. Historical research reveals that Reavis specifically targeted lands containing mineral deposits, agricultural potential, and strategic transportation routes. This was not just land grabbing, it was sophisticated real estate analysis decades before such approaches became common. Reavis understood that the value of his fraudulent claim depended entirely on what the land contained or could become. This was not just criminal activity, it was visionary planning turned to nefarious purposes. The film only touches on this strategic aspect, preferring to focus on the psychological drama rather than the economic calculation behind Reavis's scheme. This was not just narrative choice. It was a missed opportunity to explore how criminal enterprise often mirrors legitimate business innovation. Reavis's approach to land speculation, though fraudulent, anticipated patterns of development that would define Arizona's growth for decades. Number 7, Vincent Price and Samuel Fuller clashed over character motivation. Behind the scenes, Vincent Price and director Samuel Fuller engaged in intense debates about James Reavis's psychology. Price saw Reavis as fundamentally insecure, a man driven by childhood poverty to extreme measures for validation. Fuller, however, viewed Reavis as a pure narcissist, motivated by contempt for society and its rules. This was not just artistic difference, it was fundamental disagreement about human nature. Their clashes sometimes became heated, with Price defending his interpretation against Fuller's more cynical vision. This was not just ego, it was philosophical conflict about what drives people to deception. The tension between actor and director ironically enhanced the performance, creating a character with both vulnerability and menace. This was not just collaboration, it was creative friction that produced psychological complexity. Price's Reavis contains both interpretations, making him simultaneously sympathetic and repulsive, a human monster whose motivations remain tantalizingly ambiguous. Number 6, the film's production was haunted by accidents. The Arizona location shoot for The Baron of Arizona was plagued by a series of strange accidents that some crew members attributed to bad luck. This was not just misfortune, it was a pattern of mishaps that bordered on the supernatural. Equipment malfunctioned repeatedly, key props were lost or damaged, and several crew members suffered minor injuries in unrelated incidents. The most bizarre occurrence was when a set piece representing Reavis's forged document spontaneously caught fire despite no apparent heat source. This was not just coincidence, it was weirdness that unsettled everyone. Director Samuel Fuller, ever the pragmatist, dismissed these incidents as random, but some cast members reportedly felt the production was cursed. This was not just superstition, it was an atmosphere of unease that mirrored the film's themes of deception and uncertainty. The accidents, though minor, created an underlying tension that perhaps subtly influenced the performances, adding an authentic edge of anxiety to the production. Number 5. The real Reavis's documents fooled experts for years. James Reavis's forged land grants were so convincing that they fooled historians, lawyers, and government officials for nearly a decade. This was not just successful deception, it was institutional failure. Multiple experts examined Reavis's documents and found them authentic, with some even citing them in scholarly works. This was not just individual error, it was systemic gullibility. What makes this particularly remarkable is that Reavis's forgeries contained deliberate clues to their falsity, subtle jokes and signatures that, if properly examined, would have revealed their fraudulent nature. This was not just oversight, it was psychological manipulation that exploited experts' tendency to see what they expected to see. This was not just criminal success, it was a profound commentary on how easily authority can be deceived by confidence and apparent documentation. The eventual exposure of Reavis's scheme became a case study in professional skepticism and the dangers of confirmation bias. Number 4. The film's ending was changed due to test screenings. Samuel Fuller originally intended The Baron of Arizona to end ambiguously, with Reavis disappearing into the crowd after his exposure, leaving his ultimate fate uncertain. This was not just artistic choice, it was thematic consistency with a film about uncertainty and deception. However, test audiences reacted negatively to this ending, demanding clearer moral resolution. This was not just feedback, it was creative interference. Studio executives forced Fuller to add a more definitive conclusion showing Reavis's arrest and imprisonment. This was not just compromise, it was betrayal of artistic vision. Fuller reportedly hated the new ending, feeling it reduced his complex exploration of truth and fiction to a simple crime story. This was not just disappointment, it was artistic violation. The changed ending creates a tonal dissonance that still bothers critics today, transforming a morally ambiguous character study into something more conventional. This was not just revision, it was corruption of Fuller's original intention. Number 3. The real Reavis attempted to sell his claim to foreign investors. Historical documents reveal that James Reavis tried to sell his fraudulent land claim to European investors, particularly British mining interests. This was not just local fraud, it was international conspiracy. Reavis recognized that foreign investors, less familiar with American land law, might be more easily persuaded by his elaborate documentation and aristocratic pretensions. This was not just criminal expansion, it was sophisticated understanding of how geographical distance affects gullibility. Reavis even traveled to Europe to pitch his claim, presenting himself as a displaced nobleman offering investment opportunities in the American West. This was not just salesmanship, it was transcontinental deception. The film completely omits this international dimension, focusing instead on Reavis's domestic scheme. This was not just narrative simplification, it was a missed opportunity to explore how American fraud often has global dimensions. Reavis's international ambitions reveal something profound about how America was viewed in the 19th century as a land of opportunity where even the most outrageous claims might find believers. Number 2, Samuel Fuller used real prison records for Reavis's incarceration. To add authenticity to the prison scenes, director Samuel Fuller obtained actual incarceration records from the Arizona Territorial Prison where James Reavis was held. This was not just research, it was documentary integration. Fuller incorporated details from these records into the script, including specific cell assignments, work assignments, and disciplinary measures. This was not just attention to detail, it was blurring the line between historical accuracy and dramatic recreation. Some of the dialogue in the prison scenes reportedly comes directly from prison logs and guard reports. This was not just writing, it was historical ventriloquism. Fuller's commitment to authenticity extended to using actual former prisoners as extras in these scenes, adding another layer of realism to the depiction of territorial justice. This was not just casting, it was experiential authenticity that brought the past to life. Fuller's prison scenes feel documentary-like because they are built on the foundation of historical documentation rather than dramatic convention. Number 1, the film's most brilliant scene was completely improvised. The sequence where Reavis first presents his forged documents to the territorial authorities was entirely improvised by Vincent Price during filming. This was not just acting, it was spontaneous creation. Director Samuel Fuller, recognizing the magic of the moment, kept the cameras rolling despite not having planned coverage. This was not just luck, it was directorial instinct. Price's improvisation incorporated historical details he had researched but not been asked to perform, including specific legal terminology and document handling procedures that would have been period appropriate. This was not just performance, it was historical channeling. The scene's power comes from Price's ability to convey Reavis's nervous confidence, the way he handles the documents with exaggerated care, his subtle glances to gauge reactions, his strategic pauses for dramatic effect. This was not just acting, it was psychological embodiment of a master con artist at work. The improvised nature of the scene adds an authentic tension that scripted dialogue could never achieve, creating a moment where actor and character merge into something greater than either alone. Bonus fact, the real Reavis's hidden journal was discovered in 1998. In a shocking twist worthy of its own movie, a journal believed to have been kept by James Reavis during his fraudulent scheme was discovered in 1998, hidden in the wall of a Tucson historic building. This was not just a historical discovery, it was the con man's own voice emerging from the past. The journal details Reavis's motivations, methods, and psychological state during the height of his scheme, revealing a man who was simultaneously proud of his ingenuity and terrified of exposure. This was not just documentation, it was confession without remorse. Perhaps most remarkably, the journal contains Reavis's reflections on why he believed his scheme might actually succeed, including his cynical assessment of how easily authority accepts documentation that appears legitimate. This was not just rationalization, it was penetrating insight into the psychology of institutional trust. The journal, authenticated by handwriting experts, has become an invaluable resource for understanding not just Reavis himself, but the broader culture of deception in Gilded Age America. This was not just historical artifact. It was a window into the mind of a master swindler that confirms what the film only dared to suggest. The Baron of Arizona remains more than just a Western. It is a meditation on the American dream's dark underbelly, a film that dares to suggest that the line between innovation and fraud, between ambition and avarice, is often terrifyingly thin. Samuel Fuller's masterpiece, born from budget constraints and creative rebellion, transcends its B-movie origins to become something profound, a cautionary tale about how easily we believe what we want to believe, especially when it serves our interests. James Reavis's ghost still haunts the Arizona desert, not as a swindler, but as a mirror reflecting our own capacity for self-deception. In an era of alternative facts and manufactured realities, his story feels more relevant than ever.